Hi, this is Claire, and I'm going to show you how to start using resin in jewellery. This is a recent keyring I made out of some recycled components. And here is a sample that we made in class trying to represent opal. So let's show you how to set up. So it's important to have everything set up before you go, and I like to have a board. These boards are being well used, with some recycled paper on them so that any spillages aren't too catastrophic. I like to have my scales because resin is not measured by volume, it's measured by mass. I have some inks, I have some opaque inks, some transparent inks, and I have some glitter. Now, glitter itself is not all that environmental, but it's pretty locked and safe once it's in resin. I also have prepared, I've already done some designing, completed some designing, and I have some oil clay molds which I've made freeform myself, and I've put some little items inside those. I have some hard frames which I've already made horizontal, so these are little pendant discs ready for resin. I also have some silicone molds if I have any left over. So these are just manufactured silicone molds. Okay, other things that you need, which it's important to have set up, are some wooden sticks, and I like quite a long stick for mixing my resin, some little paper tubs for mixing individual colours, so it can get quite messy. Safety-wise, rubber gloves are a good idea, though I'm pretty used to doing resin, and you do have to accept that if you use these inks, they are going to stain your fingers. So just for the ease of demonstration, I won't put those gloves on, but I recommend them for students. Eye safety and fumes, I use fumeless resin, so it doesn't have a strong smell, but if it did, I would most definitely be using a ventilated area. So let's get on with this for a start. So the first thing I do is turn on my scales, and you do need to read the instructions of the resin. I tear the cup so that it is now on 0, and I mix 2 part. Now there's many different brands of resin, and this one is a 2-to-1 part mix. So the first thing I do is put in my part A, which is the largest, part 2. So I'm looking at the scales measure now, the actual mass, which is on 0, because I've teared that jug, and I'm going to pour in. So this is how I go about this. I look at how much I'm going to need. I don't have all that much, and it's amazing how far it does go. So I try to get a nice even number that's easy to divide. So I've got 470, let's get it to a nice even number. That's 600, that's pretty good. So I already have a bit of a dribble, so I'll just wipe that off, because resin tends to be very sticky. So that is 600. I'll just get that right off, that drip, off the side. Notice when you have these large amounts of resin, it's good to pour from the side, it's a little bit more accurate. So 600, so now I get my students to remember that number and halve it. So I tear it again, back to 0. So half of 600 is 300. So that's how much of part B I'm going to put in. So part B is the catalyst. So being very accurate. So I'm up to 80, 173, 215, 260, only a little drip more, just a teensy fraction, and we're on 300. Okay, so putting those away, I keep those in a sealed tub so they're not don't create a lot of mess. Okay, so The mixing process is really important. I'll just take it off the scales and turn my scales off. You mix from the bottom, so you need to mix for 2 minutes. So you set your timer for 2 minutes. And mixing from the bottom, lifting up, lifting the part A so it thoroughly mixes with the part B. You can see a sort of a silky colour there. So all the types of things that students like to put into resins are things like beads, little stones, they love glitter, and also widely experiment with silver and gold foil. We use dried flowers, so there's a little bead with some dried flowers. And believe it or not, that's all the leftovers. So what I've done with some of the leftovers is I have put some leftovers in a cloth, tied it up, and I've put it on a steel block and hit it with a hammer. So I've made some recycled pieces here to put into one of my moulds. So I'll just shift this board away. And work with the moulds now. So this is still to be mixed, lifting from the bottom and making sure it is thoroughly mixed. Because the one thing that is super disappointing is if it does not set. Okay, putting the pieces in now for my artificial, I'm going to try to make some pseudo faux opal with leftover pieces of resin, because you can shape this to any shape you like, and it's kind of good to use some of my recycled pieces. So I've just made a little arrangement of recycled resin into that mould. And it is quite effective actually, so I'll put that to one side. Now, one of the things I want to do is use this mould and make some opaque red, and I might just do that first. So I'll show you how to mix that. I'm taking that out and putting it on some paper. Good to have plenty of recycled paper, which we always have. Into my tub now, I'm going to open the red. Now this can be like incredibly strong and can make an enormous mess, so I definitely recommend students wear gloves. You only just use a tiny bit of the red opaque and put it into the tub. So as you can see here, it's not very much. And I usually try to get students to share out the resin and do most of the work they can themselves. You don't need to make very much, it goes a really long way, and you stir it up and you get a very intense red very quickly. I'll just cover this red. Okay, I'm going to put a spider, which isn't a real spider, it's just a recycled spider. I do get a lot of donations, sitting inside some neat red resin. That's my plan. So I'm pouring my resin in. Now, don't go over the edges. Try to keep this as close to the top rim, the meniscus, as possible. You certainly don't want to have it overflowing if it's a set mould like this one. I didn't go over, luckily. Sometimes when I'm demonstrating, I'm not as careful as when I'm doing my own work, and not trying to go so fast. So everything can be reused, and I really like students to reuse things, so I'm already making a bit of a mess of myself here. Okay, just setting the spider in, just dropping him in. He's sitting in red now, and that looks pretty good, but it looks a bit stark. So I always say to students to use a stick to get anything out, like dye or glitter or anything. And I'm just going to put a bit of gold glitter. I know it's not high level, but there you go. It's a bit of fun. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is put clear. So I'm going to put clear in 2 moulds. I'm going to put clear in the faux opal and clear in, this is a coin, and it's a bit sad, but it was a donation and someone had drilled a hole in it. So I'm going to try to make a keyring like this keyring out of it, at least give it some life. It's quite an old coin and I really can't believe they drilled in it. Now this is oil clay. Now there's probably plenty of commercial brands of oil clay that you can use. So oil clay is very recyclable. You can use it many times. And, you know, look, honestly, I bought 2 boxes and I have 2 big classes of students and it's lasted me years. I've never had to buy any more. So the one thing with it is pretty tough to, it gets a bit cold, you have to warm it up, that's the thing. I also want to pour some clear on this. This was some glass I made from a glass workshop I did with the students, and I made this little mushroom, and I thought I'd make a keyring for my a family member who is an expert on fungi, but I just thought maybe clear resin would be the thing to put in there too. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of clear. Try not to go over the sides. Let it just go around. Just don't want to pollute it with anything. So I just want that clear so that it matches the glass. Let's put that in. It'd be great to have someone filming here, but haven't had any takers, unfortunately. Oh, don't overflow, please. Now, if you are concerned about bubbles, the way I deal with that is a vibrating ruler at the end. So I'll put the ruler, a metal ruler under it and vibrate it in just a moment. Right, so the next thing I want to do is show you what I'm going to do to the stone. I might pop that bubble. You can just poke some of those bubbles, those air bubbles. I'm going to just put a few bits of floating colour on. So I have some purple here for this one. I'm going to just put a tiny dot of floating colour on it. So again, you only need the tiniest dot, and I'm using a stick to put it on because you can very easily go too far. Maybe I'll drop one drop. Oh, I just don't want to make a big mess. Okay, particularly when I'm demonstrating. So I've got purple now. I can't really see much of my coin anymore. So I'll swirl that around a bit. Can swirl it. Got some effects and put some floating colour on. So floating colours are white and gold. So they do set. So I wanted to show you that. These are well used, but you do need probably a pair of pliers to get the lids off sometimes. I had my trusty pliers. But make a little bit of floating white on this. So the white floats and spreads, and it has quite a beautiful effect. So you can see it's floating on top of that coin. And it'll just float on there. You can take as much off when you sand the resin later. A lot of people are very keen on the very glossy pieces with resin, but I've become a lot more fond of the sea glass sanding on resin. I think it has a beauty and warmth that's a lot more interesting. So now I've got quite a beautiful galaxy effect, and I'm going to just finish that off with just a little bit of glitter. So where's all my sticks here? So grab that. Oh, it looks really interesting actually. Just pop a little bit of glitter on the top. Not too much. We don't need to overdo it. It's very easy to go too far. And another thing I wanted to show you was the use of foils. Now these foils are pretty cheap actually. You can get them in a lot of craft shops, and they do tend to float away a lot. So I'm going to just break up some silver, very, very fine foil in around that silver pendant. It's only just a recycled thing, and I'm just really doing it for the purposes of demonstration. Okay, so you can see how frustrating it can be. But honestly, the silver and gold foil do make some absolutely beautiful jewellery. And I've got some little recycled things here, which I might just drop a few in. So you never know. I want the silver to show more than the pink. So this pink might show from the underneath, but I'm interested in keeping it silver. Right. So I could put some transparent colour in this one just to balance up the different effects. I think I'll put some, maybe a bit of magenta. I've got some magenta here. Sounds very flash, but actually it's probably fluoro pink. Here it is. That my magenta? Magenta. Good. Okay, I've already pre-opened this one. Just a drop. Oh, my goodness, it is definitely bright pink. So I'll just stir that up. Not a very subtle colour, I can tell you. So I didn't put very much in. I certainly didn't need very much. I'm just going to pour that into that mould. Just make sure all my silver is covered. It does take 24 hours for this to set. Okay, so I've made a couple of different moulds here. Now, I noticed that my spider, it has definitely sunk away, and I'm going to just put a little bit of clear just to bring it up a little higher, because you can double pour. If it does shrink, it just easily sticks on again. I don't want to go too far and push my luck and have it overflowing, but maybe just a little dot more here. Okay. So I do have quite a lot of leftover resin, and I could easily just have a play around now and use some of my silicone molds. I always get students to use up all their resin. Like one day I got kind of desperate and I used a takeaway food container. So you could, but I did that to show that you can put wood in it and beads, and this is some recycled aluminium filings from a 3D cutting tool, beads. There's all types of just stuff in there. So it just shows the students some of the things you can put in resin. So I'm going to let that set now for 24 hours, and then I'll come back and have the fun of taking it all out, which is kind of like the best bit. So, okay, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that inspires you to have some fun with resin. Thanks for watching.